Hey associates, welcome to another week. Now in this little video, I don't have necessarily announcements or anything for you. So I decided to make a video giving you, just tips, tricks, and showing you my process for doing the reading, the lecture, and taking notes. So what I will kind of show you in the rest of the video is a speed build. So me, actually going through all the materials, as if I were you, kind of if I was a student learning this, for the first time, putting these things together, how would I approach taking notes and then creating the mind map. So the first part is me doing that, but, sped up like 10 times speed, and I will give you some narration over it with, just what am I doing, what you should be looking out for, how you can make, this exercise useful. Because of course, often the difference between, oh, well, I got a lot out of that and busy work comes down to you and how you approach it and sort of what you're trying or not trying to put into it. So I'm just going to give you some little tips on how you can make it a more valuable exercise as you're doing the readings and the lecture. In the little the glass part second half, I hop into Figma to create my mind map. Now, Figma isn't necessarily my first choice for a mind map tool. You can use whatever you want. I actually really like sticky notes, kind of pen paper. I work in Canva a lot. I think there's some good uses there. You could use Visio from Microsoft, but I did choose to do it in Figma. So that way I can walk you through a few key things about Figma. So it serves as also kind of an intro tutorial just to help you get a little bit more used to that platform, since we will be using Figma in the Unit 3 project much more heavily. So it's good to just start now getting used to it. So if you don't have a strong preference of where you make your mind maps, you might consider building yours in Figma, just so it is also an exercise of how to get used to that platform and learn it a little bit more. Best way to learn a tool is just use the tool for a variety of things. Let's do it. All right, so I'm in Canvas, hopping over to that course schedule view is my preferred, but you could get there through modules. And I'm just going to go ahead and do this video on the 1.1 Global Communication Development Notes. So you want to read, do your lecture, and then make your mind map. Now I have linked both a OneNote version and now a Word doc version because I did get some feedback that, OneNote, a little buggy, which I agree as I've been testing it, playing in there, a little bit buggy. So there's a Word doc version there for you, and saving that to my own copy and then hopping into the book, which you can get if you had the tab. This is kind of the axis you can see, and inside of that vital source, you can take notes, you can highlight. So I'm going through, right, and pulling out big quotes that I think would be important for my mind map and also just are important for me as a reader to stop and say, wow, hey, that reminds me of something from a previous class, or this, has some key terms, or this really relates to the professional field. Here they're telling me exactly what, technical communicators need to know. Sometimes, you might need to look up words. Don't just read and say, I don't know what that means. Like, stop and look up a word just in case. Now, the other thing that I'm doing here is actually looking ahead. So in the chapters of the book, it said, here's what we're looking ahead to. So I pulled up the schedule to kind of, do that as well. Now, a cool thing in Vital Sources, you can actually export then all of your notes, save it as a PDF. And so now I have that little export of all my highlights and quotes and notes that I took while I was reading. And I'm using that to help me fill in that reading guide. And this reading guide is just for you to kind of stop and check your own knowledge. You should be able to answer those questions just to make sure that you're being more active in it. You don't need to turn it in, but you can. Now, I'm also using this little trick to use Google as well as Copilot to kind of verify. So, of course, you have to use more critical thinking when it gives you the output. Does it make sense based on what you've read, based on what you know? But it absolutely can be a helpful tool if you give it a nice, robust, long prompt with plenty of context. It can re-explain some things that maybe you weren't understanding right away from the book with examples. And so I absolutely recommend trying that if you feel like you need just a little bit more of like some context, some application, explain it in a different way. You absolutely can use the interns like that, but again, just make sure what they are saying makes sense with what you have been reading. But it can help you answer, right, some of the questions in the note-taking guide as well. All right, so now speed it up even more because I'm just finishing up these notes. Nothing too complicated. Going back and forth between the quotes. So notice how sometimes I do need to go all the way back to the chapter to double check something, but mostly I can use the notes that I took because I was paying attention to the key terms, the big what we call arguments, the big moves that are supporting what is in that section's header and topic sentence. Also in the Word doc and the OneNote, there's the same thing, questions, prompts based on the lecture. So I'm going back through, our kind of sort of interactive, self-guided lecture videos and just answering the questions. Again, you don't have to turn these in. They're just there to make sure that you have really taken in, the materials and are thinking about some of those core big pieces and points. This worksheet then will help you when you get to the mind map. So now I'm into Figma, and I just went ahead and created a new personal project. So you have our project, and then you should be able to make personal ones as well with your EDU account. Now, inside of Figma, there are some key things that we have to keep in mind, and so I'm just going to walk through a few of those for you here. Let me slow down this speed build. All right, so instead of a Jamboard, which is what you've been using for the culture case studies, I'm doing just kind of the regular project. And Figma works off of pages and frames. And so I'm clicking on that frame tab to basically create a new kind of canvas area. And this is where then we build everything. So from there, there's basic shapes, there's text. You can change the colors of the shapes. It should be maybe a little bit familiar, to any tool, right? You click on the element and then you can change the colors and the formatting in the side panel. In Figma, you can create these different text objects and then, put it inside of your shapes to make different groups. Once you group something, I can, duplicate just like, again, pretty much any other program. You just got to get used to it as I kind of been going through. So as I'm building this mind map, there's literally no format for mind maps. It's just a way to visually organize your information. So I'm going through, again, back to my notes that I had highlighted from both the reading, what were some maybe big quotes. I remember I had marked something that said, ooh, seems like a big argument. So what for the field alert? Because in the chapter, it is going to be, and one thing I like about this book is that it's very much like, here's how it applies to the field. So you should definitely highlight every time the book authors say, here's what professionals should do. So I was adding that to my big star. That is that so what couple sentence summary of like, what does it mean for the field based on what you learned this week, based on what you read, based on what you're bringing to the table with your personal experiences and education and projects? What do you think this all means for you as a almost professional in this general field of, tech comm and writing and public communication? So those are some of the things I've added. Now I'm just, organizing a little bit by creating more boxes. And again, I'm just pulling quotes straight from the worksheet. And I'm not really checking for exactly what you're writing down, as long as, it's substantial enough to show me that you read. But ultimately, this is your brain being forced to go back to your notes to think about what you found important, to highlight these key moments in memory so that way you are forming more connections and basically tricking / forcing your brain to think about it some more. Because it's extremely easy for us to read and go through lecture materials and be like, well, I wrote down stuff, surely I learned it, but like that's a very passive form of learning, which is basically not learning. And when you just take one extra step to like make your brain think about what it is that you wrote down, call it metacognition, and it's sort of thinking about your own thinking, that's where we start to get much longer lasting, more impactful, more applied forms of learning. So doing this mind map exercise is simply for you to look back at your notes, pull out what was important from all the things you originally thought were important. That's that metacognition. And then just start to make these connections and organize it. And a way for you to, again, just practice like information design, which should be kind of fun given our field. You should be like, yeah, I like organizing information in a pretty page because that's our major, I don't know. And then, showing. So now I'm adding these arrows of like, okay, the blue box was kind of my big picture. How is it connecting, up and down between the readings and the lectures? In Canva, you can also, maybe pull photos. So I'm saying, hey, I really liked, this idea of these 3 core things. Instead of typing it out, I'm just going to pull it from the lecture as photos, and I just copy and paste from the screenshot right in there. I'm going back through, and I really liked this key terms page, so let me just take a screenshot of that and drop it onto my mind map. See if there's anything else. I was like, this is a lot of information. Let me drop that in there as, a way to remember. Now in Figma, you can resize any frame as well by just dragging and dropping. And then there's the ability to just share the link directly, which is what you can do in terms of submitting it to Canvas. And there's just some tips and tricks for your mind map and notes activity. So the really big picture, big things I want you to do is when you're reading, look for key terms, look for key quotes, and most importantly, look for when the authors say, this is important for professionals. This is exactly what it means if you are working in this field on projects where globalization and localization occurs, which more and more is, a significant number of projects. Those are things you should highlight and be prepared to talk about on your mind map. Then you can complete the reflection, prompts, questions. That can help you with the mind map. And then your mind map itself, I really don't care what it looks like. Go as creative and wild and like have fun learning these tools, using kind of that info design as you want. But I'm just looking to see that you are reprocessing the information, you're thinking about your notes, and you're thinking about it to show me that you are going to be able to apply this information and that you're not just sort of checking off, yeah, I read, but you didn't really read. So the mind map kind of stops and makes you go, okay, did I actually pull out some key things? And you'll be good to go.